What's up, everyone? I'm Earl, the Rookie Woodworking. For today's video, I'm going to talk about safety. Safety is one of them things that, as a rookie woodworker, I haven't been too good at it, and I've been trying to get better at it over time. I've learned some lessons the hard way, so I figured it'd be a good time to make a video about safety. And then get into some of the lessons that I've learned, some lessons I've learned the hard way, and some things that I learned from previous employers that carried over pretty well into the wood shop. Now, I don't want to get into the same stuff that every other creator gets into. So I'm going to skip past the keep your hands out of machines that'll chew up your hands, to keep your hands away from blades, and to keep your loose clothing from machines that tend to eat your loose clothing and pull your body into it. And I'm going to skip over safety shields and hearing protection and safety glasses. So we're going to get straight to some stuff that most people typically don't think about. Some people, some of this stuff might seem like common sense, but to a rookie woodworker who isn't really around stuff like this, who just wants to get into it and is getting into it for the first time and they're learning on their own through videos like this one right here, a lot of this stuff is going to be stuff that they just simply didn't think about. So let's get into it. All right, so right off the bat, I'm going to go with something that I learned the hard way. And that's a lesson about cutting short pieces. And this is what happened. I was cutting a dowel rod, very similar to this. I don't think it was as thick as this one, but I only needed to take a little bit off of it, and it was short. It was like 6 inches long. And I only needed to take like a ½ inch off. Now that dowel rod did not go across to the other side of the fence. I had my thumb here holding it like this, and I went to chop that little bit of an end off, and what happened was when the blade hit it, it started turning it up over the fence like this. And when it did that, I mean, it did it super fast and super powerfully. And when it did that, it like jammed my thumb. My thumb hurt for like 5 weeks after that, after it jammed my thumb. Fortunately, that's pretty much the extent of the damage that I got out of it. It was very scary. The thing kicked it back and it hit something back here on the back of the saw, bounced back forward, hit me right in the cheek. Fortunately, the cheek didn't hurt too bad. It was a little bit of a mark there, but not much. But yeah, it served as a reminder that I should be wearing these when I use this too. But after that happened, it set me back a little bit and made me think a little bit more about what I'm doing here and why that happened and how I can prevent it. And one of the first things I noticed was you got these little signs right here that's it's a hand that's X'd out, and it has these lines here. And what I realized was DeWalt don't want me to have my hands anywhere within those lines. So I got open the DeWalt manual and found out that they don't want you to use it for anything less than 200 millimeters. Well, what's 200 millimeters? I'm American, right? So I had to convert that and found out it's roughly 8 inches. It's a little less than 8 inches. So yeah, anything less than 8 inches we don't cut, and we don't keep our hands inside these lines anymore. So whenever I have to cut something that's short like that, I'll use a crosscut sled to do that on a table saw instead. But also, whenever I have a piece that don't go across and touch both fences, what I like to do is I'll screw a piece of wood to the fence. There's 2 screws on this side, 2 screws on this side, holding that nice and sturdy so that it won't go anywhere. So when this piece needs to be cut off, it's against both sides of the fence, and it won't send a piece flying somewhere into the abyss. And it also serves as a zero clearance fence, which makes your cut cleaner in the end anyway. So yeah, that helps make it a little more safer to cut some stuff off that don't go across both fences. Another thing about it is whenever you're cutting something like this, make sure you go slow when you cut it. Don't like jam the blade down into it real hard. But yeah, take your time making that cut so that it don't want to grab. You know what I mean? Give that blade time to move away some material as you're cutting through it, and it'll be safer. Another thing that I learned the hard way was that you have to be a little bit careful when using an Outfeed roller on your table saw. I made a cut similar to this. I made a rip down a long piece of wood. It was like 4 or 5 feet long, so it had some weight to it, and sent it across to the roller on the back side of the table saw. And I sent it about this far, and then the idea was to pick both pieces up off the the table saw and then get the next piece ready to rip. But what happened was when I grabbed the outside piece and started sliding it back, it pulled that roller towards me, which pulled the piece that I just cut off that was laying on a roller into the saw blade. And I got so lucky in this situation because the saw blade actually just cut into the piece of wood and didn't throw the piece of wood. Like normally I stand off to the side away from it as I'm cutting it, but as I'm grabbing the pieces to pull off of there, I get back in front of it. And that's because I never would have thought that that piece would just come back to the blade. Like once it was clear of the blade, it was okay. Like I was in the clear, we weren't going to have any kickbacks. But whenever I pulled the other piece off the roller and pulled that thing into the blade, that's just something I never thought about happening. So from then on, I get both pieces at the same time and then get away from it. But yeah, in that situation, I was so lucky that blade didn't just grab that piece of wood and just launch it into my stomach at like 900 miles per hour or Mach Jesus. Yeah, I was really fortunate that day. Lesson learned, right? Now, I know that I said that I wasn't going to talk about getting fingers into blades and stuff like that. But this is more of an ergonomics lesson that led to me getting my fingers close to the blade. But this was another thing that I learned the hard way, and fortunately it didn't get worse than what it already was. But what I was doing here was I set all the pieces I needed to cut over here on this side of the fence that wasn't being used. So this was just open table space. I didn't see no harm in setting the pieces that were due to be cut over here. So I was cutting my pieces, shoving them through like I'm supposed to, and then I was grabbing the next piece and bringing it over and getting it ready. And when I did that, I went across the blade and just barely knocked a chunk of fingernail off of my index finger as I was coming across. So yeah, I don't set anything over here, and I try not to put like things after the cut over here either. So yeah, I keep my table clear. That way I'm not reaching across the blade a bunch. Alright, so another thing I recommend you to get for your wood shop is one of these. It's a sharps container. It's basically, these are used in the medical field a lot, but we're going to use them for our blades and our knives. They're good for like your jigsaw blades or all of your razor blades. Throw them in there. I mean, it'll take you months to fill this thing up. But what this does is it keeps those blades and stuff out of your trash bags. So if you're sitting there pulling your trash bag out and it gets heavy, how often does that thing rub against your leg whenever you pull it out of the trash can? So you end up with a razor blade that sticks out of the trash bag. And what happens if it rubs against your leg? It's going to end up gashing you open. You end up having to give that gash a nickname. It'll be so bad. And it also is helpful for your trash man. So if there's something jammed up in their truck and they have to climb in there and start sorting it out, you don't want them climbing around in there with your razor blades and stuff like that. This here will help keep them safe too. For bigger blades, like your planer blades, they come in these handy little plastic containers. So you just stick your old blades in this plastic container, wrap some tape around the seams so that it don't come apart, then you can throw it away. Like bigger saw blades, like your table saw blade or your bandsaw blades, if you're not giving them to a recycler and you're throwing them in your trash, go ahead and wrap a shop towel around them, then tape it up and then throw it in your trash. That way those blades are protected from seeing some skin. Now, another one of these things that people do not think about at all is how to dispose of their batteries. Now, if you throw your batteries directly into the trash can, what you need to do is be careful that you're not throwing it in there with some like wire that you threw away. Because if a piece of wire touches the positive and the negative terminal at the same time, the juice in that battery is going to go through that wire back to the battery, and it's going to create a loop, and it's going to get hot, and heat causes fires. Now your A, B, C and D batteries, they have the positive and negative terminal on the opposite ends of the battery. So it's not very likely that you'll have a piece of metal that touches both terminals at the same time by accident. But it does happen. Hopefully the battery dies out before it causes a fire. And you might be thinking, well, I'm not going to throw away a perfectly good battery. It's going to be a dead battery. Now, just because a battery is not powerful enough to run a piece of equipment that you had it in does not mean that it don't have any juice in it. It still has some power in it. So when you throw it away, that little bit of power that's left, if it ends up touching a piece of metal, it might be enough to cause a fire. Now, the battery that is a big culprit for causing fires is like the one that I have in my moisture meter. It's a 9-volt battery because the positive and negative terminals are right beside each other. So the proper way of disposing of this battery would be to take some electrical tape, wrap it around that battery until both them terminals are nice and covered up. And when both those terminals are nice and covered up, nothing's going to touch them both. Fire averted. Yeah, and it's that simple. It's easy. It takes seconds, then you can throw it away. So yeah, just make sure you cover your battery terminals when you throw them away. And that won't happen, hopefully. Now, another thing we should talk about is sawdust and how dangerous sawdust is. Yeah, sawdust. Now, I'm not talking about just breathing it in, which that in itself is dangerous and can cause cancers and stuff like that in the long run. But what I'm talking about is the fire hazard that sawdust is. Sawdust is downright combustible. I didn't realize this because when I first started doing this, I was working in inches of sawdust in my shop like I just never cleaned up. And then somebody brought it to my attention how much of a fire hazard it is. And then I started like researching it and looking into it, and yeah, it's pretty legitimately a fire hazard. It's downright explosive sometimes. There's a good video on YouTube or somewhere running around that shows somebody throwing this sawdust, a pile of sawdust, into a fire, and it just like blows up in their face, like huge, like just hugely combustible. And that's exactly what it's like. And all it takes is a spark to set it off. Yeah, if you have a motor going bad in your table saw and it sets a spark, it could very well just explode that sawdust that's sitting underneath that table saw. And it might not even stop there. Like, it could get other dusty areas around your shop involved in it too. The concussion of the explosion can knock dust off your ceiling and basically cause the whole room to turn into a fireball. So I've been working pretty hard at trying to clean up after myself around the shop. I also got a air cleaner that's mounted to the ceiling that cleans out the sawdust from the air. So that's helped out a lot. And then every once in a while I just knock it off of everything with a broom. But I'm also going to get a dust collection system. It's like really soon coming. But yeah, keep your shop clean. Try to prevent letting sawdust just pile up, especially if it gets like aerated. Even when it's just floating in the air, if you get like too much of it condensed in the air, a slight spark can cause the air to just go off, kind of like it's a gas in the air. Yeah, look into it. Don't take my word for it, but yeah, do your research on combustible sawdust. It's pretty impressive. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is extension cords. And the reason I want to talk about these is because a lot of rookie woodworkers or people that don't really work with their hands a lot take for granted is extension cords. They'll take these things and plug whatever they have to plug in to the same extension cord, not even thinking about it. But the thing you need to realize is extension cords have ratings. They come anywhere from like 18 gauge to 10 gauge, and they're rated for how many amps can go through this extension cord. This one here is rated for 15 amps. So if I plug this thing into my drum sander, the motor itself on the drum sander for the big drum wheel is 15 amps. Now, the motor that runs the belt that feeds the drum sander is 0.6 amps. So that machine itself is beyond the rating of this extension cord. But it'll work. Like I'll plug it in and that machine will run, and it'll run over this cord's rating. And then even worse yet, I could go ahead and plug in a shop vac that's sucking the dust out of that drum sander to that same thing. And that shop vac is rated for 10 amps. So right there you can put 25.6 amps through this extension cord in one shot. And the thing's going to allow you to do it. But the problem with that is this extension cord is going to heat up a lot. And it might very well cause a fire. And not only that, those machines are working extra hard because they have to try to suck that power through the little straw that is this extension cord. So they're working extra hard to try to get the juice to do the job. And when that happens, they heat up as well, and sometimes you will burn the motor out in your equipment. So it's not only a fire hazard, you run the risk of burning up your equipment by using the wrong extension cords. So yeah, make sure you keep your rating tags on your extension cord, and if they go missing, just put another rating tag of some sort on there. That way you know what your cords are rated for. Another thing to think about with extension cords is, like, let's say you go out and buy a 20 amp extension cord for your drum sander. But that 20 amp extension cord is 25 feet, but you need like way more than that. You need like 60 or 70 feet. So you think you can just take 3 25-foot extension cords that are rated for 20 amps, put them together and run that machine, but it don't work like that. The longer the cord is, the more resistance there is in that cord. So if you have 3 25-foot 20 amp cords together, it's going to have to work harder to get that amperage through that cord for the 75 foot of length that you just put together. And then it's going to go back to the same problems of heating up and being a fire hazard and potentially ruining your equipment. So something else to think about there. But yeah, that is it for this video. If I missed anything that you think that I should have included, please hit the comments below. If you have any other advice that I might not know, please put that in the comments below. I'm learning this every day, and I do read all those comments, and I learn from them every once in a while, which is awesome. I really appreciate that. But yeah, go ahead and do your thing where you like, subscribe, and share this video with the people that you care about, the people that you want to keep safe in their wood shops. And till next time, make something awesome.